The glass doors of the Grand Meridian Hotel gleamed under the Los Angeles sunset, worth $380 million, 40 stories of marble and gold, one of the most exclusive properties on the West Coast. Keanu Reeves stepped out of a taxi. No limousine, no bodyguards, no designer suit. Just a canvas bag over his shoulder and scuffed boots that had seen better days. He wore a faded leather jacket and jeans with a small tear near the knee. To anyone watching, he looked like someone who'd taken a wrong turn. Maybe a delivery guy, maybe a lost tourist. Definitely not someone who belonged here. He walked toward the entrance. A doorman in a crisp uniform stepped forward. His white gloves were spotless. His expression was cold. "Sir, this entrance is for hotel guests only." Keanu stopped. He smiled gently. "I understand. I'd like to check in." The doorman's eyes traveled slowly from Keanu's worn jacket down to his faded jeans. They lingered on his boots. Old, comfortable. Definitely not luxury brand. The doorman's lip curled slightly. "Do you have a reservation?" "No, but I was hoping." "Then you'll need to use the side entrance." Keanu blinked. "The side entrance?" "Yes, sir. We have standards here. The main entrance is reserved for our premium guests." A moment of silence passed between them. Keanu looked up at the building. Every window, every brick, every piece of marble in that lobby, every chandelier hanging inside. He owned all of it, every single piece. This $380 million property wasn't just an investment. It was his vision, his dream. For 3 years he'd stayed completely away, never visited, never interfered. He'd trusted others to run it with integrity, to treat people with respect, to build something different. But lately, something had been bothering him. Anonymous reviews had started appearing online, not about the rooms, not about the food, about the staff, about how they treated certain guests. Stories of humiliation, people being judged before they even walked through the door, families turned away, individuals made to feel small, all because of how they looked. So Keanu decided to see it for himself, not as the owner, not as a celebrity, but as a regular person, someone who didn't fit their image of wealth. And within 60 seconds of arriving, they were already pushing him away. The doorman raised his hand, gesturing firmly toward the side of the building. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave this entrance." Now, Keanu nodded slowly. He didn't argue. He didn't pull out identification. He didn't say, "Do you know who I am?" He simply stepped aside and walked toward the side entrance. His heart was heavy, because this was worse than he'd imagined. And what was about to happen in the next 20 minutes would change everything. Not just for this doorman. Not just for the manager inside, but for every single person who'd ever been judged by their appearance. Every person who'd been made to feel like they didn't belong. Have you ever been treated like you didn't matter because of how you looked? Stay with me. This story is just beginning, and it gets much worse before it gets better. Keanu walked along the side of the building. The pathway was narrow. No red carpet here, no elegant lighting. Just concrete and a simple door marked, "Side Entrance." He pulled it open and stepped inside. The difference was immediate. No grand chandelier, no marble floors, no fresh flowers on gleaming tables. Just plain carpet and fluorescent lights that hummed overhead. This was where they sent people who didn't fit. Keanu walked down the hallway and emerged into a smaller lobby area. A young woman sat behind the front desk. She looked up from her computer. Her name tag read, Sophie. She had kind eyes. The first kind eyes he'd seen since arriving. "Hey," Keanu said warmly. "I'd like a room for tonight." Sophie smiled genuinely. "Of course, sir. Do you have a reservation with us?" "No, I was hoping to book one now." "No problem at all." Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard. "We have availability. May I see your ID and a credit card, please?" Keanu reached into his bag. Before he could pull anything out, a sharp voice cut through the quiet lobby. "Sophie." A man in an expensive tailored suit approached from the side office. Everything about him screamed authority. Crisp white shirt, gold cufflinks, polished shoes that probably cost more than most people's rent. His name tag read, Richard Calloway, guest relations manager. He looked at Keanu with cold, calculating eyes. The kind of look that sized someone up in 2 seconds and made a judgment. "Is there a problem here?" Richard asked. Sophie shook her head quickly. "No, Mr. Calloway. I'm just helping this gentleman check in." Richard's gaze didn't leave Keanu. He studied him like an inspector examining a defective product. The worn jacket, the faded jeans, the scuffed boots. His expression said everything. "You don't belong here." "Sophie?" Richard said slowly. "We're fully booked for tonight." Sophie blinked in confusion. Her fingers were still on the keyboard. The screen clearly showed available rooms. But sir, I just checked the system. We have 12 rooms available. Richard's jaw tightened. A muscle twitched near his eye. Those rooms are reserved for our premium clientele. The words hung in the air. Keanu remained perfectly calm. His voice was steady. I can pay the premium rate. Richard turned to face him fully now. He smiled. But there was absolutely no warmth in it. It was the smile of someone about to deliver a rejection they'd practiced many times before. Sir, the Grand Meridian caters to a very specific standard of guest. I don't think you'd be comfortable here. Silence filled the space between them. Sophie looked down at her keyboard, clearly uncomfortable. Her face had gone red. Other staff members had noticed the interaction. A housekeeper paused in the hallway, watching. A bellhop pretended to arrange luggage but kept glancing over. Everyone could feel the tension. Everyone knew what was really happening. Keanu took a slow, measured breath. I'd still like to try. Richard's smile disappeared. His voice dropped lower, harder. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises before I call security. The threat was clear. Leave now, or be escorted out. Most people would have exploded right here. Would you have stayed calm? But Keanu didn't raise his voice. He didn't make a scene. Instead, he did something Richard wasn't expecting. He pulled out his phone. Richard's expression shifted immediately to irritation. Sir, are you recording this interaction? No, Keanu said quietly. He scrolled through his contacts. I'm making a call. Richard crossed his arms. I don't think that's necessary. Keanu pressed dial. The phone rang twice. A woman's voice answered, professional and crisp. Keanu. Just his name. But the way she said it carried weight, familiarity, respect. Keanu said calmly. I'm standing in the lobby of the Grand Meridian Hotel. I've just been refused service and threatened with security. Richard Calloway's face went from tan to pale in exactly 2 seconds. His eyes widened. His mouth opened slightly. Because he suddenly realized something. Diane wasn't just any employee. Diane was the hotel's chief operating officer. One of only 3 people in the entire world who knew the truth. That Keanu Reeves owned this hotel. That he was the majority shareholder. That he controlled everything. What? Diane's voice sharpened like a blade. Who refused you service? Keanu's eyes stayed locked on Richard, the guest relations manager. Richard Calloway. There was a pause on the other end of the line. A terrible, heavy pause. Then Diane's voice came back, colder than ice, harder than steel. Put him on the phone. Right now. Keanu held out his phone to Richard. Richard stared at it like it was a live grenade. His hand trembled as he reached for it. Sophie watched from behind the desk, her eyes wide. The other staff members had stopped pretending to work. Everyone was watching now. Richard brought the phone to his ear. This is Richard Calloway. Whatever Diane said on the other end drained every ounce of color from his face. His confident posture crumbled. His shoulders sagged. His free hand gripped the edge of Sophie's desk for support. Yes, I understand. I didn't know. I had no idea who. His voice cracked. Yes, ma'am. Immediately. I understand. He handed the phone back to Keanu with a shaking hand. I sincerely apologize, sir. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. Keanu ended the call. He slipped his phone back into his pocket. Then he looked at Richard, not with anger, not with satisfaction, with something worse. Disappointment. I don't want an apology, Keanu said quietly. Richard swallowed hard. Sir, please, I want to understand something. Keanu's voice was calm, but it carried weight. Why did you treat me that way? Richard opened his mouth. No words came out. His brain was scrambling for an answer that wouldn't destroy him further. But there was no good answer. They both knew it. Keanu didn't wait for a response. He walked past the front desk, past Richard, toward the elevators. Richard followed like a man walking to his execution, stuttering apologies with every step. Mr. Reeves, I had absolutely no idea who you were. Keanu pressed the elevator button. That's exactly the problem, Richard. The doors opened. Keanu stepped inside. Richard hesitated, then followed. The doors closed. They were alone. You had no idea who I was. Keanu continued. So you decided I didn't belong. You decided I wasn't worth your time. You decided I should be threatened and removed. The elevator climbed silently. Numbers ticked upward. Richard stared at the floor. I was just trying to maintain standards. Whose standards? Keanu asked. Richard had no answer. The elevator reached the executive floor with a soft chime. The doors opened. A woman was waiting in the hallway. Diane, She was in her 50s, impeccably dressed, always professional. But today her face showed something rare, pure panic. Keanu, I'm so deeply sorry. If I had known you were planning to visit, you would have rolled out a red carpet. Keanu finished for her. I know. That's exactly why I didn't tell you. He walked past her into the executive conference room. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the glittering city below. A massive table dominated the center. Leather chairs, crystal water glasses, everything perfect, everything expensive, everything designed to impress. Sit down, Keanu said. Both of you. Deanne and Richard obeyed immediately. Keanu remained standing. He walked to the window, hands in his pockets, looking out at Los Angeles. For 3 years I've stayed away from this hotel, he said. I trusted you to run it with integrity, to treat people with respect, to build something meaningful. Deanne nodded quickly. And we have Keanu. Revenue is up 22%. Our guest satisfaction scores are the highest in the scores are fake. Diane stopped mid-sentence. Keanu turned to face them, or at least they're incomplete. You're only measuring the satisfaction of people who actually get to stay here. He pulled out his phone again. Opened a folder. For the past 2 months, I've been reading reviews, real ones, from platforms you don't control. He scrolled through them slowly. A single mother with 3 kids, turned away because her children were too loud in the lobby. Scroll, an elderly veteran, told he didn't fit the aesthetic of the hotel. Scroll, a young cancer survivor, asked to leave the pool area because her surgical scars made other guests uncomfortable. Diane's face had gone white. Richard stared at the table. I wasn't aware of these specific incidents, Diane began. You weren't aware because you only pay attention to people who look like they matter. Keanu interrupted. His voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath. He turned to Richard. How many people have you personally turned away this month? Richard's voice was barely a whisper. I don't keep count. Huss. Silence. Maybe 15. Keanu's eyes darkened. 15 human beings. 15 people who wanted to give this hotel their money, their trust, their business. And you decided they weren't good enough based on what? Their shoes. Their jacket. The car they arrived in? Richard looked like he might be sick. I want a full list, Keanu said, turning back to Diane. Every guest turned away in the last 6 months. Every complaint filed. Every incident that was swept under the rug or dismissed. Diane hesitated. Keanu, that's going to take some time to compile. You have 2 hours. Diane's eyes widened. 2 hours. Keanu repeated. And Diane. Yes, I want the truth, all of it. Because if I find out you're hiding something, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Keanu left the conference room. He didn't go to a luxury suite. He didn't retreat to some private office. Instead, he did something unexpected. He went back downstairs, back to the lobby. He found a chair in the corner, a simple armchair near a decorative plant. And he sat, just watched, for 2 hours. He observed how his hotel actually operated. A well-dressed businessman arrived. 3 staff members rushed to help him, bags carried, door opened. Welcome back, Mr. Peterson. Your usual suit is ready. Smiles everywhere. 10 minutes later, a woman in her 30s entered. She wore scrubs, clearly just off a hospital shift. Exhausted. She approached the desk, waited. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Staff walked past her. No one acknowledged her. Finally, Sophie noticed and helped her. But the contrast was obvious. Keanu saw it all. He watched a teenager in a hoodie get followed by security. The kid was just waiting for his parents. But security watched him like he was a threat. He saw an elderly woman in a wheelchair get ignored, while staff chatted among themselves. He saw a man with a thick accent be spoken to slowly, loudly, like he was stupid. Each incident was small, subtle, easy to miss if you weren't looking. But together, they painted a clear picture. This hotel had a culture problem, and it went deeper than Richard Calloway. 2 hours passed. Keanu's phone buzzed. A text from Diane. I have the information. Conference room. Keanu stood and headed back upstairs. When he entered the conference room, Diane was there. She looked like she'd aged 5 years in 2 hours. On the table sat a thick folder. Her hands were shaking. Keanu. Her voice cracked. It's worse than I thought. She opened the folder. Inside were printed emails, complaints, incident reports, dozens of them. She pulled out the first page. This is from April. A family celebrating their daughter's quinceañera. They were asked to keep the noise down during their private event. When they complained, they were told this hotel caters to a different clientele. She pulled out another. May. A group of nurses who pooled their money for a weekend getaway. They were told the spa was fully booked, even though it wasn't. The spa manager later wrote in an email that they didn't match the wellness brand image. Another page. June. A black businessman was stopped by security 3 times in one day, asked to show his room key, asked what he was doing in the executive lounge, asked if he was lost. Diane's voice was shaking now, July. A woman with Down syndrome was told by a restaurant hostess that the dining room was reserved for hotel guests only, even though she'd as a hotel guest. Her mother complained. The complaint was marked resolved, but nothing was actually done. Keanu's jaw tightened with each story, but he stayed silent. Let Diane continue. August. A man in a turban was. Diane couldn't finish. She put the paper down. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I didn't know, she whispered. I swear to God, Keanu, I didn't know it was this bad. Keanu walked to the window again, looked out at the city. How did you not know? His voice wasn't angry, just tired. Diane wiped her eyes. I was focused on numbers. Occupancy rates, revenue, guest satisfaction scores from people who checked out. She took a shaky breath. I never looked at the people who never got to check in. Keanu turned around. Show me the worst one. Diane hesitated. Then she pulled out a document from the very back of the folder. It was clipped separately, marked COFDNTILENTRNLUSEONLI. She slid it across the table to Keanu. He picked it up. Read the header. Guest Relations Protocol. Maintaining Brand Excellence. Author Richard Calloway. Distributed to all guest relations staff. Keanu read slowly. His expression didn't change, but his knuckles turned white gripping the paper. The document outlined a systematic policy. Not officially approved. Not in any employee handbook, but enforced nonetheless. It instructed staff to discreetly discourage certain guests. The language was careful, corporate, but the meaning was clear. Assess guests upon arrival for brand alignment. Politely redirect individuals whose presentation may impact the luxury experience of premium clientele. Utilize phrases such as fully booked, not available, or alternative accommodations recommended, when necessary. The document included a list, warning signs that a guest might not be suitable, casual clothing, visible tattoos, unconventional appearances, loud children, non-standard English, large groups of young people. The list went on. At the bottom, a final note. Remember, our brand is built on exclusivity. Protecting that image is everyone's responsibility. When in doubt, politely decline. We can't accommodate everyone, and that's by design. Keanu set the paper down. He walked to the window, pressed his forehead against the cool glass, closed his eyes, and for a moment, he was 10 years old again. Watching his mother come home from her hotel housekeeping job, exhausted, humiliated, crying because a guest had screamed at her, because a supervisor had blamed her for something that wasn't her fault, because she'd spent 8 hours being invisible, being treated like she didn't matter. He opened his eyes. Call an emergency meeting, he said quietly. Who should I? Department, every manager, every supervisor. Diane stood. When? Now. Diane pulled out her phone, started making calls. Keanu turned back to the document. Read it one more time. This wasn't just discrimination. This was systematic dehumanization. Organized, documented, distributed. And it had been happening in his hotel, under his name, using his investment. He picked up the paper, folded it carefully, put it in his pocket. Diane. Yes? How many people knew about this policy? She looked at the distribution list. According to this, at least 15 staff members received it directly. Keanu nodded slowly. Then we have 15 conversations to have. 30 minutes later, the conference room was packed. Every department head, every manager, every supervisor. 32 people total, some confused, some nervous. Most had no idea why they'd been summoned. Richard Calloway sat in the corner, pale and silent. Diane stood near the door. Keanu stood at the head of the table. He didn't say hello, didn't offer pleasantries. He simply placed the folded document on the table. The room went quiet. How many of you have seen this before? Keanu asked. No one moved, no one spoke. Keanu unfolded the paper slowly. Read the title aloud. Guest Relations Protocol, Maintaining Brand Excellence. A few people shifted in their seats. Eyes darted away. I'm going to ask one more time, Keanu said, his voice calm but firm. Who has seen this document? Silence stretched for 10 seconds, 15, 20. Then slowly a hand rose, a woman in her 40s. Head of housekeeping, Margaret Chen. I saw it, she said quietly. About 4 months ago. Keanu nodded.
Did you read it? Yes.
And? Margaret swallowed hard. I thought it was strange, but I assumed it came from upper management. I didn't think I could question it. Another hand rose. Then another. Within a minute, 8 people had raised their hands. 8 people who knew. Keanu looked at each face, and none of you said anything. Margaret spoke again. With respect, Mr. Reeves, we were told this policy came from ownership. The room went completely still. From me? Keanu asked. Margaret nodded. Richard told us the owners wanted to maintain exclusivity. That it was about protecting brand value and ensuring the right kind of clientele. Keanu turned to Richard. Richard's face was bright red. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Is that what you told them? Richard's voice was barely audible. I was trying to maximize revenue. Premium guests spend more. If we fill rooms with people who don't match the brand, we lose high-value clients. So you lied, Keanu said flatly. I didn't lie, You told staff that I wanted people judged by their appearance. You used my name to justify cruelty. That's a lie. Richard opened his mouth, closed it. No defense existed. Keanu turned away from him, walked to the window. For a moment, he just looked out at the city lights. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Softer, more personal. My mother cleaned hotel rooms for 20 years. The room shifted. Everyone listening now. She worked in buildings like this one. Beautiful lobbies, expensive art, crystal chandeliers. He paused. Every day she scrubbed toilets, changed sheets, vacuumed floors, and every day she was invisible. His voice wavered slightly. Wests would walk past her like she didn't exist. Management would blame her for things that weren't her fault. Other staff would treat her like she was beneath them. He turned back to face the room. She would come home exhausted. Not just from the physical work, but from the disrespect, from being made to feel worthless, from being treated like she didn't matter. Several people looked down at the table. When I made money, I promised myself something. Keanu continued. If I ever had the chance to build something, it would be different. It would be a place where everyone was treated with dignity, where your worth wasn't determined by your job title, or your clothes, or your bank account. He placed both hands on the table, leaned forward. I bought this hotel because I believed in that promise. I invested $380 million because I wanted to prove that excellence and kindness could coexist, that you could run a successful business without crushing people's spirits. His eyes moved to Richard. You took that promise and destroyed it. Richard's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was wrong. Please, Mr. Reeves, I have a family. I have a mortgage. You have responsibilities. Keanu interrupted. And one of those responsibilities was treating people with basic human decency. You failed. He straightened up. You're fired. Effective immediately. Richard stood, his whole body shaking. Please, I'll do anything. I'll change. I'll fix this. Just give me one more chance. You made people feel small, Keanu said quietly. You made them feel worthless. You made them feel like they didn't belong, because of clothes, because of appearances, because of prejudice. His voice grew stronger. You don't get to do that and keep your job. You don't get to weaponize someone's insecurities and then ask for mercy. Security appeared at the door. Diane must have called them. Escort Mr. Calloway out, Keanu said. He's no longer employed here. Richard looked around the room desperately, looking for support, for sympathy, for someone to defend him. No one met his eyes. Security took his arms gently but firmly. As they led him toward the door, Richard turned back one last time. You're making a mistake, he said, his voice breaking. This hotel needs people like me, people who understand luxury, people who know how to maintain standards. Keanu looked at him directly. No, Richard. This hotel needs people with compassion. We just didn't know how much we were lacking until today. The door closed. Richard was gone. The room remained silent. 31 people sat frozen, waiting, wondering. Who else would be fired? Who else would pay for staying silent? Keanu turned to face them. Keanu let the silence hang. Every person in that room was holding their breath, calculating their own involvement, wondering if they were next. Finally, Keanu spoke. I'm not going to fire everyone who knew about this policy. Relief flickered across several faces. But the relief vanished. You're all on notice. Every single one of you. He walked slowly around the table. If you knew about this and said nothing, you have 30 days. 30 days to prove you understand what this hotel actually stands for. 30 days to show me that you can do better. He stopped behind Margaret Chen's chair. Margaret, you said you thought it was strange. Why didn't you report it? Margaret's voice trembled. I was afraid. Afraid of losing my job. Afraid of being labeled a troublemaker. Keanu nodded. Fear is powerful. It keeps us quiet when we should speak. It makes us complicit when we should resist. He continued around the table. But here's the truth. This hotel doesn't need people who follow orders blindly. It needs people who have the courage to say when something is wrong. He returned to the head of the table, looked at Diane. Diane, you're the CO. You set the culture. And you missed this completely. Diane's eyes filled with tears. I know. I failed. You did. Keanu agreed. You were so focused on profit margins and occupancy rates that you forgot to look at how we were making that profit. Who we were turning away to achieve those numbers. He picked up the folder of complaints, but you also spent 2 hours compiling this. You didn't hide the evidence. You didn't make excuses. You showed me the truth, even though it made you look bad. Diane wiped her eyes. That matters, Keanu said. Accountability matters. Owning your mistakes matters. He set the folder down. So here's what's going to happen. Everyone leaned forward slightly. First, we contact every single person who was turned away in the last 6 months. A manager raised his hand hesitantly. Yes. Keanu acknowledged him. Sir, that could be hundreds of people. I don't care if it's thousands. Keanu said firmly. We find them. We apologize, personally, not with a template email, with real phone calls, real conversations. The manager nodded. Second, we offer them a complimentary weekend stay. Full service. No restrictions. No judgment. A woman from finance spoke up. Mr. Reeves, the cost could run into hundreds of thousands of dollars. 750,000. Keanu interrupted. I've already done the math. And I don't care. He looked directly at her. This hotel made them feel unwelcome. We humiliated them. We judged them. We're going to prove we were wrong and apologies cost money. The finance manager sat back. Third, Keanu continued, mandatory training. Everyone, from executive level to housekeeping. We're going to learn what respect actually means. Margaret raised her hand. What kind of training? Empathy training. Keanu said. Unconscious bias training. Customer service that actually serves people, not just profits. He paused. And it won't be some boring PowerPoint presentation. We're bringing in real people. People who've been discriminated against. People who've been judged. They're going to tell their stories, and you're going to listen. The room was completely silent now, everyone absorbing the weight of what was coming. Fourth, Keanu said, we're implementing a new policy. A real one this time. He pulled out his phone, typed something, then read it aloud. Every person who walks through these doors deserves to be treated with dignity. No exceptions. No qualifications. No secret protocols that say otherwise. He looked up. This will be printed. Framed. Hung in the lobby where every guest and every employee can see it. Where it can't be ignored or forgotten. He put his phone away. And fifth, he walked to the window one more time. We're changing how we measure success. Diane looked confused. What do you mean? Revenue isn't enough anymore. Keanu said. Occupancy rates aren't enough. Guest satisfaction scores from people who checked out aren't enough. He turned around. From now on, we also track complaints. We track people who felt unwelcome. We track how staff treat guests when they think no one important is watching. He pointed at each person. Your bonuses won't just depend on profit. They'll depend on how many people you made feel valued. How many complaints you resolved. How many guests you treated with genuine kindness. A young manager near the back spoke up. Mr. Reeves, how do we measure kindness? Keanu smiled slightly. You ask. You listen. You pay attention to the people who are usually invisible. He walked toward the door, stopped, turned back. I know this is hard. I know it's uncomfortable. I know some of you are thinking this is too much, too expensive, too idealistic. He paused. But let me ask you something. Why did you choose to work in hospitality? No one answered immediately. Think about it, Keanu said. Hospitality. The word literally means the friendly and generous reception of guests. Not just rich guests. Not just guests who dress right. All guests. Margaret spoke quietly. I wanted to make people happy. To give them a place where they felt special. Others nodded. Then let's actually do that, Keanu said. Let's build something worth being proud of. He opened the door. Meeting adjourned. You have your assignments. Diane will coordinate. And remember, he looked back one final time, 30 days. Show me you can change, or find somewhere else that values profit over people. He walked out. The door closed behind him. The room erupted in whispered conversations. Some scared. Some inspired. All of them changed. 3 weeks later, Margaret Chen sat in her office with a list of names. 23 people. 23 guests she personally needed to call. People who'd been turned away, dismissed, made to feel invisible. Her hand shook as she dialed the first number. It rang 4 times. Hello. An elderly man's voice. Hello, is this Mr. James Peterson? Yes. Who's calling? Margaret took a breath. My name is Margaret Chen. I'm calling from the Grand Meridian Hotel. 3 months ago, you attempted to book a room with us, and you were turned away. Silence. I remember. Mr. Peterson said coldly. Sir, I'm calling to apologize. What happened to you was wrong, completely wrong. You were judged based on your appearance, and that should never have happened. More silence. We've made significant changes. Margaret continued, and we'd like to invite you back for a complimentary weekend stay. Full service, our way of making this right. Mr. Peterson's voice cracked slightly. Why now? Why do you suddenly care? Margaret closed her eyes. Because someone finally paid attention. Someone finally looked at who we were actually hurting. She heard him breathing on the other end. Will I be treated differently this time? Yes, sir. You'll be treated the way you should have been treated from the beginning, with respect, with dignity. I'll think about it, Mr. Peterson said. Then he hung up. Margaret made a note. 1 down, 22 to go. Some calls went better. Some went worse. A single mother cried when Margaret apologized. I felt so small that day, she said through tears. My kids saw how they treated me. I had to explain why we weren't welcome. Margaret cried too. You are welcome, she said. You always were. We just failed to show it. By the end of the week, 17 people had accepted the invitation. 17 people willing to give the hotel another chance. The first arrivals came that Friday. Keanu was there. Not announced, just present. He watched from the lobby. Mr. Peterson walked through the main entrance. The same doorman who'd once redirected guests stood there. Marcus. He'd been through the training, heard the stories, understood what he'd been part of. When he saw Mr. Peterson, he stepped forward. Welcome to the Grand Meridian, sir. We're honored to have you. Mr. Peterson hesitated, studied Marcus's face, looking for insincerity, for judgment. But Marcus's expression was genuine. Thank you, Mr. Peterson said quietly. Sophie was at the front desk. She smiled warmly when she saw him. Mr. Peterson, your suite is ready. I've made sure you have a view of the city. I hope you enjoy your stay. No hesitation, no checking his clothes, no subtle evaluation. Just kindness. Mr. Peterson's eyes grew wet. This is different, he said softly. Yes, sir, Sophie replied. We're learning, we're trying to be better. Over the next few hours, more guests arrived, each one treated with genuine warmth. The young mother with 3 children. Staff helped carry her bags, brought coloring books for the kids. Made sure she knew the children were welcome everywhere. The cancer survivor who'd been asked to leave the pool. The new spa manager personally greeted her. Our wellness center is for healing, she said. All bodies, all stories. You belong here, the woman cried. Keanu watched it all. He saw staff members going out of their way. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Because they'd heard the stories. Because they'd looked into the eyes of people they'd hurt. And they'd decided to be different. That evening, Keanu sat in the lobby again. Same chair as before. Margaret approached him. Mr. Reeves. He looked up. I wanted you to know. 16 of the 17 guests told me this weekend changed how they see people, how they see themselves. She sat down next to him. Mr. Peterson said something that stayed with me. He said, I thought I didn't deserve kindness. You reminded me that I do. Keanu's eyes glistened. That's all I wanted, he said quietly. For people to feel like they matter. Margaret nodded. We still have work to do. Some staff are struggling with the changes. Some don't understand why we're spending so much money on apologies. They will, Keanu said, or they'll leave. Either way, we're moving forward. He stood up, looked around the lobby. It looked the same as it had 3 weeks ago. Same marble, same chandeliers, same expensive furniture. But something fundamental had changed. The energy was different. You could feel it in how staff moved. How they spoke to guests. How they looked at each other. Sophie was helping an elderly woman with directions. Taking time. Being patient. Marcus was laughing with a family, making their kids smile. The new guest relations manager, a woman named Patricia who'd spent 10 years working in homeless shelters, was greeting every single guest personally. No judgment, no filtering, just welcome. Keanu walked toward the exit. Diane caught up with him. You're leaving, for now, he said. But I'll be back. unannounced, to make sure we stay accountable. Diane smiled. I expect nothing less. He pushed through the doors. The same doors he'd been turned away from. Marcus held the door open. Have a good evening, Mr. Reeves. Keanu paused. Marcus, can I ask you something? Of course, sir. When you first saw me that day, what did you think? Marcus's face showed shame. Honestly, I thought you didn't belong. I'm ashamed to say it, but that's the truth. And now, Marcus looked him in the eyes. Now I know that belonging isn't about what you wear. It's about being human. And every human belongs. Keanu smiled, patted his shoulder. Thank you for learning that. He stepped out into the cool evening air, pulled out his phone, opened his notes, wrote, real change doesn't happen in meetings. It happens in moments. When one person decides to see another person, really see them, that's when everything shifts. He put the phone away and walked into the Los Angeles night.